Dillette, and I'm an academic associate at Arizona State University and an oral historian. Today is October 27th, 2009, and I'm continuing to interview Arizona City County Management Life members for the ACMA Oral History Project. And today I'm interviewing Kathy Connolly, who worked for the League of Arizona Cities and Towns for, I think it's 34 years, beginning in 1971.
That's correct.
As staff assistant, at that time under the direction of Jack Dabalski, and she became executive director in 1998.
Correct.
Until her fairly recent retirement in 2005.
That is correct.
Okay. So we are documenting the history of life members in order to share the values and principles of people who created the council manager form of government, and in this case, its relationship with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. And today we are taping in Kathy's home on Echo Lane in Phoenix, and Amanda Soros is our videographer. And this is the beginning of interview number 17. So we're going to start with a really easy question. Tell us where and when you were born.
I was born in May of 1946 here in Phoenix, Arizona at St. Joseph's Hospital.
Okay.
St. Joseph's Hospital at the time is not located where it is today, but it still has the same name. And I basically grew up in Phoenix with the exception of a couple of years. We spent just a wonderful 2 years up in Clarkdale, Arizona.
Oh.
My father was hired to sort of help close down the smelter yard up there, and we just had a wonderful time. I was in like 3rd and 4th grade kind of stuff. It was a great it was a great break for the family. But then we came back to Phoenix, and I graduated from high school in Phoenix, and then went away to college, and came back to Phoenix after college, and have lived here ever since.
Okay. After this is over, you have to remind me. I want to come back to the subject of your stay and your father's work in Clarkdale, because I happen to be doing research on the mine.
Oh, how interesting.
And Susie Goot and the closing of the smelter.
Of the smelter.
Just by coincidence.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting. Well, my grandfather came to Arizona in 1894 from New York, but he had recently arrived from Ireland and to Jerome, Arizona. And so my father was born in Jerome, and then by the time I was born, they had moved to Phoenix.
Amazing.
Can I do?
Had anyone in your family done this kind of public service, or what made you think that you wanted to go into this kind of public service?
I'd really like to give you a really deep answer to that question, but when I was starting out my undergraduate degree, political science sort of looked interesting to me.
Okay. And where was it you did that degree?
Santa Clara University. My father was a graduate of Santa Clara, and they went co-ed just right before I was ready to go to college, and so there really was not too much of a question as to where I was going to go to school. And it was a fabulous educational opportunity, but it looked really interesting, and after I finished my undergraduate degree, I really wanted to live in San Francisco, but everybody only wanted to hire me for clerical positions, and I had this wonderful bachelor's degree, and I thought I was really smart. So I realized that really I needed a master's degree, and so we had to do that sort of on less expensive mode, and so I came back home, lived at home, went to ASU, got my master's degree, and then people started to take me seriously as I went out to try to find work.
So what was the year then that you went into graduate school at ASU?
The fall of 1967, because I graduated from Santa Clara in 1967.
And how many women were going into graduate school with you at that time?
Oh, not too many. Not too many.
Did you have difficulty getting admitted?
No, I did not have difficulty getting admitted. That wasn't an issue at all. My master's degree is in political science. There really wasn't much of a public administration program at the time, and there were a couple of political science professors that really were just superb at the time, and so I felt like I had a wonderful graduate education, but it was very different from my education at Santa Clara, just pure size of campuses and student bodies, and also the kinds of students as well. So,
did you have an actual experience after you graduated from with your undergraduate degree that let you know that you were just going to be funneled into a clerical position?
oh yes, I probably went on 20 or 25 interviews up in the Bay Area and in San Francisco. Stayed with some friends parents who lived in that area, and really decided I could start in some sort of a management kind of a thing, management program, but nobody wanted to even talk to me about management programs. They wanted to know whether or not I could use a machine that was called, I can still remember this, an addressograph machine. Now, I happened to know how to use an addressograph machine because during college I had worked for the Alumni Association at Santa Clara to, earn a little money while I was at school. And they happened to have an addressograph machine. So I actually knew how, I even knew what the machine was, but I certainly wasn't prepared to
Did you say
to
no
use,
when they
yeah, oh, I just, no, I said, yes, I do. Yes, I do know how to do it, and I'd be happy to be in a position to have to supervise somebody doing the addressograph machine, but I'm not going to operate an addressograph machine, so.
So none of those jobs were actually open to you at that time, and it wasn't so much that you were female, or was it that you just had an undergraduate degree?
Oh no, at the time, the undergraduate degree was the ticket. I mean, all of my male friends from Santa Clara were getting great jobs and, going into management programs with banks and all sorts of interesting kinds of things. But none of my female friends were. Almost all of them ended up going into education. Mm-hmm. Went on and got their extra 2 years or whatever it is in California and became school teachers.
Right. And tell us a little bit about ASU's program that you joined, and maybe some of the most impressive or legendary professors.
There were two that really had a major impact on me. Heinz Hink was probably the one. He taught constitutional law, but he taught constitutional law as from a government perspective. I mean, it wasn't a law course. It was a course in government, and he was a fabulous professor, just absolutely fabulous. And interestingly enough, I don't know if that name means anything to you, but he also was on the city council in Scottsdale, and very much involved in criminal justice matters, headed up the MAG Criminal Justice Committee, etc. But anyway, he was a wonderful professor. And then there was another one who actually is still around. His name is Bruce Mason, and he was really quite a character, but he knew so much about Arizona government, and I think he really is who piqued my interest in state and local government in Arizona, and that sort of led me to, where I ended up.
Mm-hmm. So talk us through how you graduate from your program and you're in the job market.
Yes, and not for very long. I was very fortunate. It took me a long time to finish my master's thesis. It took an excruciatingly long time to finish my thesis.
And what was your thesis?
I did it on Arizona Town Hall and its impact on Arizona state government. It was very interesting, and the town hall people allowed me to go to a town hall, and then I did a survey of the legislature on whether or not they cared what the Arizona Town Hall, recommended year to year. Anyways, it was very interesting, and Bruce Mason was the chair of my thesis committee, whatever, graduate committee, I guess is whatever they called it. And that was a little bit of a departure during those years when I was, because I did teach. A friend of mine who had been in the program at ASU, actually working on her doctorate degree, started the political science department at Scottsdale Community College. And then her husband was transferred back east, and sort of mid-first semester, and I think they searched for all sorts of people to take it over and couldn't find anybody. And she said, well, Kathy's almost finished her master's degree, so she could at least step in and do it for a while. And so I did do the political science department at Scottsdale Community College for a year and realized that I was not a natural-born teacher. Some people are, some people are. I'm not. But I had been interviewing for jobs as I was finishing up my master's thesis, and really sort of fell into the league job. I actually went to interview with MAG, the Maricopa Association of Governments, which was also headed up by Jack Tobolsky in those years. And for, I don't remember even, a position that wasn't particularly interesting. But I think they saw my resume. They were very impressed with Dr. Hink, with Heinz Hink, and he was one of my references. Mr. Tobolsky also is the graduate of a Jesuit education, as I am. I think all of those things sort of played in, and so the day after I interviewed for the MAG job, which really didn't fit me, I was called back to say, we have a position at the league that maybe would fit more with what your interests are. Mm-hmm. And I interviewed, and that night they called and said I had the job, so wow. It was great. But there were a few very lean years in between, and I was still living at home, which was not obviously ideal. But
yeah. So at that time, I was just looking through the Jack Tobolsky's interview mm-hmm. for this oral history project, and he mentioned that Jay Bell was the executive director in Colorado at the league, and he was Jack Tobolsky's mentor.
Correct.
And how important that mentoring system was to him.
Without any question.
So was it obvious right from the beginning that you were stepping into a position not only to have this position but also to be mentored by Jack Tobolsky? Or did that grow on the two of you?
That sort of grew on the two of us. I was young, and he had some experienced people on his staff, and I was sort of the not necessarily in age, but within experience and everything. So I was pretty young, but it didn't take too long, and clearly we hit it off in a wonderful way. He's really just a brilliant man, and he really took me in his hands and molded me in a way that it just simply wouldn't have happened with somebody else. And he really didn't care what you were. He didn't care if you were male or female. You could have been purple or green. What he wanted was somebody who was smart and who would work hard. Mm-hmm. And those were the characteristics that he looked for in people. And beyond that, he didn't care. And it was a wonderful working relationship for a long time.
Very long time.
Right.
So can you give us a sense in that first decade or maybe the first two, can you just try to paint a portrait of what Arizona is like at that time? Because it's very different than it is now.
Very
and the
different.
role that the league is beginning to play, especially in relationship with ACMA.
Be happy to. Arizona was a much less complicated place, and obviously many fewer cities, and much smaller when I started with the league in 1971. And government, particularly local government at that time, was also a lot less complicated. And so we had a number of particularly smaller jurisdictions that were operating basically with a city or town clerk, and the council sort of in a commission form of government with, they're taking either formally or informally responsibility for different areas of administration, and basically you could do it pretty informally and not just get away with it, but it would work. But within probably a decade after I started, by the early 80s, it was clear that the requirements that both the state and the federal government were placing on local government were going to make this way more complicated, and cities, even smaller cities, and even towns, we're going to probably need a professional manager to do it. That this part-time, just sort of doing what was best for the community, it wasn't going to work. It just simply wasn't going to work because there were just too many requirements by the state and federal government. So we had the league as an organization, certainly Jack Kowalski and myself, we always promoted the concept of council manager government. We would go out and talk to communities that didn't have that form of government and talk to them about the benefits of it, help them write ordinances to actually implement the form of government. We never were at an official clearinghouse of who was out there who might be willing to take the position, but clearly we would be able to, steer some people their way and say, here are at least a few people that you could start interviewing and get an idea of the kind of people who might be out there to work with it. It was very important to us. And
I wonder if you can fill in, and I know this is before your time, but I just realized in looking back, we don't really have anybody speaking to how ACMA was initially set up and developed with the league. Do you have any? Well, it
was a pretty informal organization, even in the early years that I was at the league. I mean, there was an organization, but they met a couple of times a year, and that was about it. And the league always provided the staffing for them in terms of setting up meetings, but really their activities were pretty much a conference or two a year, and maybe getting together at the league conference. It was very, very informal. Not until really the mid-'80s did it become more of a formal organization with a formal governing structure. Before there was always a president, but it was sort of, who are we gonna get to take this position? But it became much more formal. They started inviting assistants and assistant city managers, as well as management assistants, into the organization, and that's about the time that it really started to become more formalized, is in my recollection, Nancy. And then, after I took over as director, after I succeeded Jack as director, the president of the ACMA at the time approached me about the league doing even more than we had been doing. And we had been staffing them, but it hadn't been anybody's, even part-time work. It was, it was just something that somebody did as part of their duties at the league. But at that point in time, ACMA really recognized that they really wanted to do more. And then we signed a formal contract between the league and ACMA, which is still in existence today. I'm sure it's probably different than it was, and as a matter of fact, it grew over the years. And in return for some modest compensation, then we basically assigned a person at the league not to work full-time for ACMA, but to clearly have that as one of their major responsibilities.
And is that how you handled it? There were all these other affiliate organizations for fire chief and police chief.
Right.
Was it a similar kind of a situation?
No. We only have, but I believe this is true today too, we only have this kind of formal contractual relationship, certainly during my time, with the city managers and with the finance directors. Okay. There are a number of affiliate groups, as you said, the fire chiefs and the police chiefs and the planners, etc., but we don't have that kind of formal relationship. The only other group we